The rain came in the way Seattle rain always did in early September, not dramatic, not insistent, just present, a fine mist that clung to everything. The awnings along Pike Street, the windshields of parked cars, the sleeves of Emma Carter's wool dress. She had been sitting at the window table of the Copper Lantern Cafe for 22 minutes. She knew the exact number because she had checked her phone 11 times. And each time the screen lit up, there was nothing from him. No running late, no almost there. Just her own reflection in the dark glass between the warm cafe and the wet Seattle night. Emma pressed both palms around her mug of chamomile tea. Lukewarm. She hadn't ordered a second one. She didn't want to seem too comfortable, all the things she'd trained herself not to be. Asterisk. Be casual. Be light. Don't want too much. Asterisk. She was 31, and somewhere between 24 and now she had learned to hold herself at arm's length from her own desires. The way you hold a photograph of someone you used to know. You can look at it, you just can't let it look back at you. She smoothed her cream-colored knit dress, her nicest one, and tucked her ankle boots under the chair. She had noticed the scuff on the left heel only after sitting down. The bell above the door rang. His name was Derek Halstead. She had been talking to him for 2 months, texting mostly, 3 phone calls, each one ending pleasantly, each one leaving Emma with a warmth she carried into the next day like a small lamp she was afraid to put down. He spotted her and crossed the room. Emma. He sat without taking off his jacket. Hi, Derek. She smiled. She was genuinely glad to see him. The first few minutes were fine. He asked about her week. She told him about the hospital, careful not to linger too long on the hard parts. He ordered a black coffee. Then the nodding slowed. She noticed it the way you notice weather changing, not dramatically, but in the way the air shifts its weight before rain. It was the look of a man deciding something. Emma, can I be honest with you? She already knew. She didn't know how. Something in the set of his shoulders. The fact that he hadn't asked a real question about her since he sat down. Of course, she said. Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. I think you're a good person. You seem genuinely kind. The word times genuinely landed the way these words always do, like a pillow placed over something sharp. But I don't think this is going to work. You're just not really my type. He glanced, briefly, at her dress. Her hands. The worn heel she'd tried to hide. You give off a certain vibe. Like a single mom. Very domestic, settled. That's not a bad thing. It's just not what I'm looking for. Emma sat very still. The Christmas lights, strung along the ceiling, blurred at the edges of her vision. Asterisk. He doesn't know a single thing about my life. She set a $10 bill on the table for the tea she hadn't finished. I appreciate your honesty, she said. I hope you find what you're looking for. She walked out. The mist received her quietly. She made it to her car. She sat with her hands in her lap and the engine off, and then she let herself cry, not from surprise but from recognition, from seeing clearly a thing she had already suspected was true. She had not been enough, or rather, she had been exactly enough. Just not for him. She wasn't sure yet which one hurt more. Emma Carter had been a pediatric nurse for 7 years at Seattle Children's Hospital. She had chosen nursing the way some people choose a calling, not because it was easy or well compensated, but because she could not imagine not doing it. She had known since she was 16, sitting beside her younger brother Marcus in the children's ward while he recovered from a ruptured appendix, watching a night shift nurse named Patricia, who remembered his name, brought him crossword puzzles, and explained every procedure in plain English before she did it. Emma had thought, asterisk. That is what I want to do. Asterisk. 7 years in, she still thought it. She worked pediatric oncology 3 days a week, the hardest ward in the building. She had chosen it deliberately, not because it was comfortable, but because someone had to be there, and she wanted it to be someone who cared. She was good at her job. Her supervisor, doctor, Lawrence Nields, had written in her last review that Emma had an exceptional capacity for sustained compassion under pressure. The kind of praise that makes you feel both proud and slightly lonely because it implies the thing being praised is rare. Outside the hospital, her life was smaller. A one-bedroom apartment in Finney Ridge with a bay window lined with plants. A cat named Biscuit, an orange tabby of profound laziness and sharp emotional intelligence. A best friend named Carolyn Marsh, a physical therapist who had been the most reliable constant in Emma's life for 7 years. She had, until recently, a moderate and increasingly exhausted hope regarding love. She had been on dates, many dates. She had been ghosted, assessed, found wanting, and delivered variations of the same gentle exit speech enough times to have memorized the rhythms of it. She had gotten very good at absorbing these assessments with grace. She had gotten very bad at believing they didn't mean something about her. Carolyn called the morning after the copper lantern. "He said Times single mom vibe," Carolyn repeated after Emma had told her. "He did. That man has never in his entire life done anything as well as you. Do your job on your worst day." Emma laughed. It came out thinner than she wanted. "I'm going to take a break," Emma said. From all of it. She meant it. She had made a decision standing in the drizzle outside the cafe. She would stop looking. Pour everything into the parts of her life she was already good at, the parts where her particular variety of caring was wanted. It was a sensible decision. It was, she would later recognize, the kind of decision you make just before your life changes. Seattle Children's Hospital held its annual Healing Hearts Gala on a rainy Thursday evening in mid-October, in the hospital's atrium, which the events committee spent 3 days transforming with paper lanterns and long tables draped in white linen. It was a fundraiser for the Pediatric Oncology Wing. Emma had volunteered to help set up every year for 6 years running. She arrived at 4 in the afternoon, 2 hours before the event doors opened. In comfortable clothes she'd change out of before the guests arrived. She helped carry chairs from the storage room, helped drape tablecloths, helped arrange the silent auction items that the development team had laid out on a long table near the east wall. The children's activity corner was her project. Every year, Emma set up a table in the far end of the atrium, where children attending with their parents could decorate cupcakes, make paper flowers, or do simple crafts while the adults circulated and drank wine and bid on spa packages and restaurant gift cards. She had started it 3 years ago with a modest suggestion to the events committee and a small personal investment in craft supplies, and it had become one of the most photographed corners of the event. She was arranging the cupcake decorating station, white frosted cupcakes, small bowls of sprinkles in 6 colors, tubes of food-safe gel icing when the atrium doors opened and the first guests began to arrive. Emma changed in the staff restroom into the dark green dress she'd brought in her tote bag. She put on small gold earrings. She went back to her table. He came in at 7:15. She didn't notice him at first. She was helping a small boy named Owen, who was about 5 and extremely serious about his cupcake decoration, apply blue sprinkles in a pattern that he kept restarting because it wasn't quite right. Emma had the patience for this. She had the patience for most things, in the same way that a river has patience for the bank it runs alongside, not as a virtue exactly, but as a structural fact. When she finally looked up, it was because a small girl had materialized on the other side of the table and was staring at the sprinkle bowls with the focused desire of someone planning a heist. She was about 7 years old. She had dark brown braids with small gold beads at the ends and was wearing a dress the color of a tangerine. She looked at Emma with very direct hazel eyes. "Can I?" she asked, pointing at the sprinkles. "Absolutely," Emma said. "Pick your cupcake first." The girl selected the cupcake in the dead center of the tray with the gravity of someone making an important decision. Then she looked up at Emma and said, "I'm Sophie." "Hi, Sophie." "I'm Emma. Do you work here?" "I do. I'm a nurse." Sophie considered this. "My dad says nurses are brave." "Your dad sounds smart." He's over there. Sophie pointed without looking. Emma followed the direction of Sophie's gesture toward a man standing near the edge of the table, close enough to have been watching, far enough to have given his daughter space. He was around her age, maybe a few years older. He was wearing a dark jacket and a plain white shirt, no tie, and he had the particular posture of someone who is comfortable with physical work, shoulders slightly square, weight evenly distributed, nothing performative about the way he stood. He caught Emma's eye and raised a hand in a small, apologetic wave, the universal parental gesture for times, "Sorry my kid has attached herself to you." Asterisk. Emma smiled and shook her head slightly. Asterisk. It's fine. Asterisk. Sophie was now applying pink sprinkles to her cupcake with the concentration of a surgeon. "Sophie," Emma said, "do you want to try the gel icing? We can make letters." Sophie's head came up immediately. "My name? Your name? Sure. Or anything you want." Sophie thought about it for 3 full seconds. Then, "Can we do times Dad asterisk?" Emma glanced at the man at the edge of the table. He had moved slightly closer. She could see him more clearly now, dark hair, dark eyes, a face that looked like it had been tired for a long time and had simply decided to continue anyway. "We can definitely do times Dad," asterisk Emma said. She helped Sophie write the 3 letters in careful white gel script on the pink frosted cupcake. Sophie's hand was unsteady, and Emma's steadied it, without making the steadying obvious, just a gentle counterbalance, so the letters came out legible. When they were done, Sophie held up the cupcake and turned around. "Daddy, look." The man crouched down to her level. "That is beautiful, Soph. Emma helped me." He looked up at Emma. "Thank you." "Really, she did most of the work," Emma said. Which was mostly true. He stood back up. "I'm James Whitfield," he said. "Emma Carter." They shook hands in the slightly formal way that feels absurd at a cupcake station. Sophie was already studying the sprinkle selection for a second. "She loves things like this," James said. He had a calm voice, not quiet exactly, but unhurried. "I forget sometimes that she just wants to make things." "Most kids do," Emma said. "That's the best part of this table." Sophie reappeared with a plain, white frosted cupcake. "Emma," she said seriously, "will you help me write my name now?" "Of course," Emma said. James watched them for a moment. Then he stepped back, giving them space, and went to speak with someone he apparently knew, another man in a blazer, who slapped him on the shoulder in greeting. Emma helped Sophie write times Sophie in careful capital letters, slightly crooked, completely hers. When the evening wound down and the event staff began collecting the remaining cupcake trays, Sophie appeared at Emma's side one last time. She was holding the original cupcake, the one with Time's date on it, in both hands. "This one's for you," Sophie said. Emma blinked. "That one's for your dad. He said you should have it." Sophie's hazel eyes were very certain. "He said to tell you thank you for being patient." Emma looked up. Across the atrium, James Whitfield was watching from near the door. He nodded once, very slightly. Emma took the cupcake. "Thank you, Sophie," she said. "You have kind eyes," Sophie said. Then she turned and ran back toward her father. Emma stood at the empty cupcake table, holding a frosted cupcake with the word Times, Dad written on it in slightly crooked white letters, and felt against all reasonable expectation something warm move through her that she hadn't felt in a long time. She ate half the cupcake. It was very good. They saw each other again 11 days later. Emma was leaving the hospital at the end of a day shift, exhausted in that particular way that isn't just physical, but is instead an overall, dimming the way a computer dims its screen when the battery runs low. She was in her regular clothes, the ones she brought to change into, dark jeans and a gray sweater that had a small hole at the left cuff she kept forgetting to mend. James Whitfield was in the hospital lobby. He was sitting in one of the chairs near the main entrance, Sophie beside him, both of them with their heads bent over what appeared to be a very involved coloring book. Emma almost walked past him. She slowed instead because something in his posture, the same particular tiredness she had noticed at the gala, visible again, made her pause. He looked up. "Emma Carter," he said. Not surprised, or not entirely. "James Whitfield." She stopped. "Is everything okay?" Sophie had a checkup. He closed the coloring book. "She's fine. Completely fine, just a routine thing. Her pediatrician is upstairs." He said it quickly, with the practiced fluency of a man who has learned to reassure people before they can become alarmed. Sophie looked up. "Emma." She said it with the uncomplicated pleasure of a child who has already decided she likes someone and sees no reason to renegotiate that position. "Hi, Sophie." Emma crouched slightly. "What are you drawing?" "A horse." "But the legs are wrong." Sophie held up the coloring book. The horse's legs were, indeed, at some creative angles. "Those might be a very fast horse's legs," Emma said. "Like it's mid-run." Sophie looked at the drawing critically. "Oh," she said. Yeah, she seemed satisfied with this. James was looking at Emma with an expression she couldn't quite categorize. It wasn't the assessing look she had learned to dread. It was something more quiet, more simply attentive. "We were about to get coffee," he said. "There's a place 2 blocks down. Nothing special. If you haven't," he paused, "if you haven't had coffee yet." Emma had, in fact, had 3 cups of coffee that day, beginning at 6 in the morning. She had already been awake for 10 hours. Her feet were sore. "I could have coffee," she said. The cafe 2 blocks from the hospital was a small, no-frills place called Green Door Coffee, with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu and a dog sleeping in the corner near the pastry case. Sophie ordered hot chocolate and sat immediately at a table by the window and resumed her coloring with perfect self-containment. Emma and James sat across from each other with their coffees. He told her, without her having to ask much, that his wife's name had been Christine, that she had been killed in a car accident 5 years ago, a November morning. Black ice, a highway on-ramp when Sophie was 2. That he had been a structural engineer before that and was still a structural engineer now, which surprised him sometimes. The fact that grief could exist alongside a continued ability to read blueprints and calculate load-bearing requirements. He said it all, without self-pity, which Emma recognized as its own kind of careful work. She told him about her brother Marcus, the appendix, the nurse named Patricia. She told him why she had chosen oncology specifically, that she'd thought about it, and decided she would rather be in the hardest place than spend her career wondering if she was doing enough. She told him about Biscuit the cat, who had once knocked an entire pot of soup off the stovetop, and shown no subsequent remorse. James laughed at that. It was a good laugh, real, a little surprised. Sophie appeared at their table twice. Once to show them a completed horse, the legs still interpretive but confident, and once to ask if they could come back to this cafe again sometime because she had only eaten one kind of pastry and wanted to try the others systematically. "That's a very organized approach," Emma said. "She gets that from me," James said. He said it with a particular wryness that was also, underneath, clearly pride. Emma walked home that evening. It was close enough, and the rain had stopped for once, and stood at her window looking out at the wet street and thought about something she had not thought about in a while, the possibility that a good thing might be approaching. She made herself be careful with the thought. She set it down gently, like something that might break. Over the following weeks, they developed a loose and unplanned routine. Green Door Coffee on Tuesdays, which James's schedule allowed and which happened to fall on one of Emma's regular days off. Green Lake Park on Saturdays, when the weather cooperated, which in Seattle, in late October, meant occasionally. Sophie always brought the coloring book and eventually, at Emma's suggestion, a set of colored pencils that were better suited to fine detail work than the crayons she'd been using. James brought coffee on the Tuesdays when they met outside the cafe. He remembered that Emma took hers with 1 sugar and no cream. This small fact that he had simply paid attention registered in Emma's body as something she would not let herself name yet. She noticed things about him. The way he listened fully, without the half-attention that many people mistake for politeness. The way he talked to Sophie. As a person with real opinions, not a small inconvenience to be managed. Carolyn, updated weekly, had opinions. "This sounds like something," she said. "It's coffee and a park," Emma said. "With a man who brings you coffee. And his 7-year-old. Emma. You like him." Emma watched a yellow leaf fall from a maple. "I think I might," she said. "I'm being careful." "You're always careful," Carolyn said. "Sometimes you're so careful you miss the thing." Emma thought about the cupcake. Sophie's matter-of-fact declaration. Asterisk, "You have kind eyes." Asterisk, "I know," she said again. Differently this time. There was a Saturday in early November that Emma would keep for the rest of her life, the way you keep a stone you picked up somewhere beautiful. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was full. The weather had turned sharp and clear, the way Pacific Northwest weather occasionally does in autumn, as if to apologize for the months of rain. The sky was an improbable blue. The leaves at Green Lake were at their last brightness, gold and rust and a deep, almost red. Sophie had run ahead to the edge of the lake, where a small cluster of ducks were assembled with political intensity near a bench. She was narrating something to them under her breath. The ducks were skeptical but attentive. Emma and James sat on a wooden bench along the path. The coffee was warm in her hands. There were other people in the park, families, dogs, a pair of elderly men playing chess at a table nearby. But the bench felt private in the way that certain moments do, as if the rest of the world had agreed to give them space. "Can I tell you something?" James said. Emma looked at him. His eyes were on Sophie, but not with urgency, just that particular kind of ongoing parental attention, the background tracking that never fully turns off. "Yes," Emma said. "When I first met you at the gala." He paused. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I could tell something had happened to you recently. Something that had made you," he looked for the word, "careful." Emma was quiet. "I recognized it," he said. "Not because the same thing happened to me, but because I spent about 2 years after Christine in a version of that. Where you stop letting yourself want things in case the wanting hurts." Emma looked down at her hands. The lake was very still. "I don't know what happened," James said. "And you don't have to tell me. I just wanted you to know that I see it. I think whoever made you feel like you were less than you are was working with very incomplete information." Emma felt the familiar sting behind her eyes that she had learned, over years, to hold back. She held it back now, but only barely. "Someone told me I wasn't date material," she said. She said it flat, matter of fact, the way you read from a label. "A few weeks before the gala, he said I gave off a settled, domestic vibe, that it wasn't what he was looking for." James was quiet for a moment. "What a strange thing to say to someone," he said finally. Not with anger, with something more like genuine puzzlement, as if the logic of it didn't hold together. "He meant it as an observation," Emma said. Which was almost worse. "I know." James turned to look at her then. Fully. Directly. "I want to say something to you, and I need you to hear it correctly, because I'm going to say it in a way that might sound like I'm repeating something insulting. But I'm not." Emma met his eyes. "You are not date material," James said. The words landed exactly as they had before in the same place, with the same initial force. But they held still, and then something shifted. "What you are," James said, "is time's home material. You are the kind of person who makes a place feel safe. Not because you're ordinary, because you're not, Emma. You are not ordinary at all. But because you are genuinely present with people. You show up. You remember things. You sat with my daughter for 20 minutes, decorating a cupcake, and treated every sprinkle decision like it mattered. Because to Sophie it did, and you understood that. That is not a small thing." Emma was holding her breath without realizing it. "What that man was describing as a deficit," James said, is the thing I have been looking for 5 years." The lake was very still. Somewhere behind them, the old men were playing chess. Sophie was still addressing the ducks, who appeared to have reached a consensus. Emma let out the breath she'd been holding. "James," she said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "Yeah," he said, as if she'd asked a question. They sat for a moment in the cold November air, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, watching Sophie crouch down to speak to a single duck that had separated from the group and appeared to be considering her argument. "She's going to need to run for something someday," Emma said. "I'm starting a college fund," James said. "It's going to be very large." Emma laughed. It came from somewhere real. It sounded like herself, the self she'd been keeping in careful storage for a while, the one that didn't need to be careful all the time. Carolyn called on a Monday evening with her careful tone, the one reserved for things she didn't want to say badly. "People are talking," she said. "About you and James." Emma set down the shirt she was folding. "What kind of talking?" "That you're interested in him because he's stable. That you're going after a grieving single father for—" Carolyn stopped. "I'm telling you because you should know, not because I believe any of it." Emma sat on the edge of the bed. Biscuit climbed from the laundry pile into her lap with calm certainty. It was 2 nurses in general pediatrics. Neither worked closely with her. She filed this without letting herself feel the full weight of it, a skill that was both her greatest strength and, she recognized, something she'd never quite fully examined. She told James the next Tuesday. Sophie was at school. She had made herself a promise after the park. Stop carrying alone the things she didn't have to carry alone. He listened. When she finished, he said, "How are you feeling about it?" "I'm angry," she said. It surprised her by how directly it came out. "I don't usually let myself be angry." "You can be angry," James said. "It's a reasonable response to someone saying something untrue about you. I also don't want this to become a thing. I don't want Sophie to be any part of it." James looked at her directly. "I've been careful with Sophie, with myself, because I've been figuring out what it means to let someone matter again. And I want you to matter. Whatever other people make of that is not something I'll let determine my choices." Emma looked at him. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. Sophie arrived from school pickup with 17 new facts about whales and a clear intention to share all of them. They let her. November turned. Emma worked a long stretch of nights, withdrawing slightly the way you do when you've been honest about something and need a few days to let the new openness settle. She was not avoiding him, but she was being careful. On a Wednesday night, 12 hours into a shift, she sat in her car in the hospital parking lot and thought about what Carolyn had said. Asterisk. "You're so careful, you miss the thing." Asterisk. She started the car. She drove to Green Door Coffee, open until 10. James was there at their table, blueprints spread before him, held open with a salt shaker and a sugar dispenser, frowning at something with complete concentration. He looked up. The frown cleared. She sat across from him. "I've been a little careful," she said. "I noticed." Not accusatory. Just, asterisk, "I noticed." Asterisk. "I do that. I get close to something and find ways to give myself more buffer, in case I'm wrong about it." "You're not wrong about it," he said. "I know." She looked at him. "That's why I'm here." Sophie was at her friend Margot's house, her first sleepover. A milestone that had cost James 3 calls to Margot's mother to confirm the address, the pickup time, and the emergency flashlight situation. They talked until the cafe closed. His work, a school in Beacon Hill with an unusual structural challenge. Her work, a patient she was rooting hard for, whose name she didn't say, but whose weight James understood from the way she said it. "I'm glad you came tonight," James said on the sidewalk. "Me too," Emma said. He walked her to her car. She drove home, called Carolyn from the parking lot. "I think I'm done being careful," she said. Carolyn made a sound Emma had known since she was 23. It meant asterisk. Finally, and I am very happy for you. Asterisk. It was Sophie who asked the question. This was appropriate, because Sophie had, in many ways, been at the center of the whole story, not as a prop or a complication, but as a person in her own right, who had her own feelings about Emma and had communicated them consistently and clearly from the beginning, in the direct, unambiguous way that children have before the world teaches them to qualify everything. She had told Emma she had kind eyes. She had given her the cupcake. She had described her whale facts with the expectation that Emma would find them interesting. And Emma had, genuinely, because the way Sophie described information, with a kind of proprietary excitement, as if she had personally discovered that blue whales produce sounds louder than any other animal on Earth, was its own form of wonderful. On a Sunday in early December, James told Emma he had something planned and she should meet them at the Green Lake Arboretum at 3 in the afternoon. Emma arrived at 3. The sky was gray but dry, which in Seattle in December counted as a triumph. The Arboretum was mostly bare now, the big cedars keeping their dark green, but everything else stripped down to its architecture. The branching shapes of maples and alders, beautiful in their plainness. Sophie was standing near the entrance path. She was wearing her orange dress. She had developed strong opinions about that dress and wore it at every significant occasion over a pair of corduroy leggings and boots. She was holding something behind her back. "Hi, Emma," she said. "Hi, Sophie." Emma looked around for James. He was a few feet back, hands in his pockets, watching. "I have something for you," Sophie said. She brought the thing from behind her back. It was a piece of cardboard from what appeared to have been a cereal box, painted white, with letters in orange marker that Sophie had clearly made herself. Large, slightly uneven, absolutely certain. The letters read, "Asterisk, will you marry my daddy?" Asterisk. Emma's hand came up to her mouth. She looked at James. He had come forward now. He was not in a suit. He was in his regular jacket and his regular jeans and his regular self, and he was looking at her with that particular full attention that she had been learning to let herself need. He went down on one knee. He held up a ring, a simple gold band with a small oval stone, warm-colored, honest. "I have been trying to figure out the right time to do this since November," he said. "There isn't a right time. There's just now, and Sophie wanted to be part of it. And I thought—" He paused. "I thought you should know that this is something we both mean, not just me." Sophie, beside him, nodded with great emphasis. Emma looked at the cardboard sign. She looked at the ring. She looked at James, on one knee on a gravel path in a cold December arboretum, sincere and slightly nervous, and completely himself. She thought about the mist outside the Copper Lantern Cafe on a September evening. She thought about the feeling of having been measured and found wanting. She thought about what it turned out she was worth. "Yes," Emma said. Sophie threw both arms in the air and made a sound of pure, uncomplicated triumph. Several birds startled from a nearby cedar. James stood up, and Emma took one step forward, and he put both arms around her, and she let herself be held without hedging, without buffer, without the particular careful armor she had been carrying for a long time. Sophie appeared between them a moment later, inserting herself with the confidence of someone who knows precisely where she belongs. "We're a family now," she announced, into the collective warmth between them. Emma looked down at her. "Yes," she said again. "We are." The wedding was small, the kind of small that is a choice, not a compromise. They married on an April Saturday in a friend's backyard on the edge of Seward Park, the cherry trees dropping their pink abundance across the grass. Carolyn stood beside Emma. Sophie stood on the other side in a pale cream dress, holding white ranunculus she had selected herself with great seriousness. James's college friend, Thomas Burke, stood with him. Dr. Lawrence Niels and several nurses attended. 2 cried. One of them had, months earlier, been among those who had talked, and she stood near the back with a quietness Emma recognized without bitterness as the form remorse sometimes takes. Emma wore ivory, long-sleeved against the April chill, and boots with no scuffs on the heels. She had thought about the old pair that morning, still at the bottom of the closet, the ones from the copper lantern. She had bought new ones, not expensive, just hers. Under the cherry tree, James held her hands and said, "Asterisk, you showed me that a life can get bigger after it gets small. I'm not afraid of the bigness anymore." Asterisk, Emma said. Asterisk, you saw something in me that I had talked myself out of seeing. I'm going to spend the rest of my life being glad you looked. Asterisk, Sophie asked Carolyn in a loud whisper during the ring exchange why adults cried at happy things. Carolyn told her it was a design flaw. Sophie accepted this. Later weeks, months into the ordinary texture of their life, a patient's mother noticed Emma's ring at the hospital and asked how they had met. Emma smiled. A fundraiser, a cupcake, and a 7-year-old who is an extremely good judge of character. What she didn't say was the rest of it. The cafe in the rain, the man who had told her she was not the right material, the months of careful distance she had kept from her own wanting, and then a park in November, bare trees and cold air, a man saying times I think whoever made you feel like you were less than you are was working with very incomplete information. Asterisk. She carried that sentence the way you carry the thing that changes everything. Not loudly, not as a trophy, but simply with her, always, the way warmth stays in your hands after you have been somewhere that loved you. Biscuit approved of James immediately, spending the first month of cohabitation sleeping on his feet. James accepted this with the equanimity of a man who understood that you don't choose a cat's loyalty. You simply receive it. Sophie, the following spring, discovered the copper lantern on a walk. She wanted to try the pastry in the window. They sat at the table near the window, Emma's old table, from that September evening. "Is this place special?" Sophie asked. "It was once," Emma said. Not in a good way. But now, Emma looked at the lights strung along the ceiling. The rain against the glass. The warmth inside. "Now it's just a cafe," she said. Sophie turned back to her lemon curd tart, eating it with the systematic appreciation of someone working through a list. Emma wrapped her hands around her tea, properly warm this time, and watched the rain fall on the Seattle street. She thought about all the versions of herself she had been on the way to this Tuesday afternoon. The careful one, the retreating one, the one who ate half a frosted cupcake in an empty atrium and felt something shift. Outside, the rain fell. Inside, the lights were warm, and Emma Carter Whitfield sat in her life without any remaining reservation exactly where she was supposed to be.